All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to unpack a truly unprecedented moment in modern tech, the exact moment a state-of-the-art AI went completely dark on a global scale. We're talking about how a regulatory kill switch, something most people thought was purely theoretical, was just flipped overnight. And more importantly, we're going to break down what this massive disruption actually means for the future of tech, business, and AI governance.
Let's start with a mind-boggling number, 18. For 18 entire days, Anthropic's cutting-edge models, Claude, Fable 5, and Mythos 5, were completely shut off globally. This wasn't a server crash or a simple bug. This was a direct government order, executed on just 90 minutes' notice. Think about that for a second. Some of the most advanced systems in the world, systems heavily relied upon by massive enterprises, were brought to a sudden, complete halt.
All right, let's get into Act 1, the shocking event.
Now, sure, export controls have been lifted and access is being restored. It's really easy to just breathe a sigh of relief and move on, right? But we absolutely have to look at the massive geopolitical precedent this outage just set. When the U.S. Department of Commerce sent CEO Dario Amodei a directive, they cited national security authorities. The order was strict: suspend all access for any foreign national, whether they were inside or outside the United States. And this explicitly included Anthropic's very own non-citizen employees, and they were given roughly 90 minutes to comply. Just think about the logistics of that, an hour and a half to untangle a massively complex global user base. It's like being asked to reroute all the world's commercial flights while they're already in the air.
Unable to filter users by nationality in real time, and citing a legal obligation to comply, Anthropic literally had no choice. They took everything down globally. This turned a theoretical regulatory kill switch into an immediate, devastating operational reality. Within hours, access went totally dark across AWS Bedrock, Google Cloud, Microsoft Foundry, and the direct Claude APIs. Enterprise customers in finance, healthcare, SaaS, and critical infrastructure found their core services abruptly disabled, with zero warning and absolutely no recourse.
Moving right along to Act 2, the anatomy of a kill switch.
To really grasp how this unprecedented global takedown unfolded so incredibly fast, we have to trace the exact sequence of events. Honestly, the sheer speed of this escalation reads like a tech thriller. On June 9th, Anthropic launched Fable 5, which was a huge deal as their first publicly available model in the high-end Mythos class. But just 3 days later, on June 12th, the Commerce Department directive arrived, leading to a complete global blackout. This was followed by a highly tense standoff for 2 weeks, before a phased, softening approach began on June 26th, and finally, full withdrawal of the controls on June 30th. Talk about complete whiplash for the developers and businesses relying on these tools.
That brings us to Act 3, the contested jailbreak. So why did this happen so fast? What actually triggered the flip of that switch? Well, the facts are still a bit murky, so we're going to look at both sets of claims impartially to really understand the debate happening behind closed doors. On one side, based on Wall Street Journal reporting, Amazon researchers and a White House advisor claimed there were dangerous cyber attack vulnerabilities, essentially a jailbreak that tricks the AI into bypassing its own safety rules, and that Anthropic had declined to fix the issue. But on the flip side, Anthropic and independent analysts heavily disputed this. They argued it was a narrow issue, its significance was vastly inflated, and critically, if this standard were applied evenly, it would effectively halt the deployment of all competitor frontier models, not just Anthropic's. It's a fundamental disagreement on the actual level of risk.
As this freeze dragged into an 18-day standoff, intense pressure started mounting from literally all sides. Tech executives, investors, and InfoSec leaders applied massive pressure, even publishing an open letter demanding rules based on scientific evaluation and democratic process. But the loudest warning was actually geopolitical. They argued that freezing leading U.S. models was just handing precious time to fast-rising Chinese open-weight developers, those building freely available AI models, who are already aggressively closing the gap with models like Claude Opus 4.8. For a lot of people, a U.S. freeze looked like a huge potential strategic misstep.
So the crucial point is how they ultimately resolved it. On June 30th, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick finally lifted the export license requirement, but man, it came with strings attached. Anthropic had to agree to 3 new proactive measures. They must proactively detect and address security risks, work directly with the government on protocols for future model releases, and aggressively report any malicious activity discovered in their models. To meet those new demands, Anthropic stated they implemented a brand new safeguard, tested by the Commerce Department's Center for AI Standards and Innovation. This new safeguard successfully blocks the specific jailbreak officials were worried about roughly 93% of the time. But
There's an acknowledged trade-off here. About 7% of the time, it may potentially flag completely benign requests. So the model might be just a little bit more restrictive for everyday users in order to satisfy these national security demands.
The immediate result for users on the ground? A very phased, careful restoration. Fable 5 rapidly returns to global users on platforms like Claude.ai and Claude Code, though initially with up to 50% weekly limits for premium and enterprise users. But the more advanced Mythos 5 remains tightly restricted, restored mostly to government-approved US customers for now through their Glasswing security program. And the major cloud providers, AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Foundry, they're basically left waiting in line to be re-enabled.
Let's shift to Act 4, the precedent nobody voted on.
Because beyond the technical fixes and the restored access, an invisible regulatory regime just materialized out of thin air. And it's going to affect the entire industry. There's a brilliant quote from the analysts in our source text that asks the absolute vital question: does Washington effectively approve every frontier release from here? I mean, nobody voted on this process. It emerged entirely from a tense 18-day standoff. But it really highlights that an ad hoc regime now exists where frontier models have to pass through a national security gate before release. And as we just saw, potentially even after they've already been released to the public.
And we know for a fact this isn't just an isolated incident targeting Anthropic. In the exact same window of time, OpenAI rolled out its latest model, GPT 5.6, to only a very small set of approved partners following a specific request from the US government. This pretty much proves that staggered, government-vetted releases are quietly becoming the new normal for the most capable systems. And this is all happening just ahead of a major August deadline under a recent executive order for the Trump administration to produce standardized benchmarks for AI security risk. So the improvised process of the last few weeks, it's rapidly becoming formalized.
Finally, Act 5, the Builder's Survival Guide.
If you're an engineer building on these systems, or an executive running a business dependent on them, the operational takeaway from this 18-day shock is absolutely blunt. You have to change how you operate. Model access is no longer just a given technical utility like electricity or internet bandwidth. It has officially become a geopolitical variable. It's a factor in your tech stack that is heavily dependent on international relations and government policies. It can literally be withdrawn by a government you don't even answer to over a highly technical dispute you aren't a party to on exactly 90 minutes' notice.
The organizations that survived the blackout intact didn't just get lucky. They followed a highly specific playbook. Let's call it the portability mandate. Step 1, map all your model, cloud, and integration dependencies. Step 2, establish multiple providers and heavily tested fallbacks. And Step 3, implement self-hosted or open weight capacity where it makes sense. The companies that thrived used these exact steps to hot swap to alternatives like Claude Opus 4.8, the absolute second access dropped. This 18-day event proves that portability is now the only rational response to concentrated dependency risks.
And there's a massive ripple effect here, the global sovereignty problem. For users outside the United States, particularly those in Europe, this 18-day freeze is a harsh wake-up call. It proves that your direct access to American frontier models relies entirely on Washington's ever-changing posture. When the U.S. Commerce Department machinery decides to shape global access, non-U.S. companies are essentially caught in the crossfire, making the argument for sovereign and open-weight capacity stronger than it has ever been.
The template is now firmly set. The government has proven that the switch works. And as we wrap up this explainer, you really have to ask yourself, is your business prepared for the next 90-minute regulatory kill switch? Because when that national security gate inevitably swings shut again, will your sovereign capacity keep the lights on for your customers, or will your business go totally dark? Thanks for joining me to unpack this fascinating shift in the tech landscape.